Ready to start, Gail? Good afternoon. Welcome to the Nuclear Engineering Department Colloquium. I am Gail, I'm substituting for Dr. Dars, who is on travel this week. I want to make sure I say the right things here. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this afternoon, Ms. Gail Mattson. Ms. Mattson is a professional engineer with more than 28 years experience in environmental engineering and project management that covers environmental studies and restoration design, hazardous and radioactive waste management, and nuclear facility operations. Currently, Ms. Mattson is the Vice President of Parallax Incorporated. She is the executive in charge of business development for environmental and management services nationwide, and is responsible for the execution of remediation and waste management contracts for DOE officers at Oak Ridge, at Savannah River, and EPA. Parallax Incorporated is one of the nation's largest woman-owned, small, disadvantaged environmental firms that has performed work at nearly every site in the DOE complex. Ms. Mattson has been an active volunteer with the Society of Women Engineers for 20 years and has served as the fiscal year 01 national president. The topic of our presentation this afternoon is opportunities for women and minorities in nuclear engineering. Please welcome Ms. Gail Mattson.
I did a little research when I found out that I was being invited to speak, and so I went out on the web and found an article by Dr. Dodd about your program. I was really impressed. This is a really nice colloquium and webcast and so forth. And I noticed that not all your topics are strictly on nuclear engineering, that he wants the students sometimes to think out of the box. So this is one of those opportunities for a little bit of a different topic to get you thinking about something else besides just pure nuclear engineering. So I hope you enjoy it this afternoon. Okay. I'm going to touch on 5 different areas. I'm going to go over current status of employment and students in nuclear engineering, talk about various outreach programs to women and minorities, and then we're going to talk about some achievements, give you some examples, role models. Then I'd also talk about some opportunities for employment, and then I'm going to put some challenges out to you. Okay. I'm probably just like preaching to the choir here, because I think a lot of you are aware of what the issue is with nuclear engineering. We all know that the university enrollment decreased over 20% over the past 20 years. This is overall university employment enrollment. And we know that the graduate and undergraduate populations in engineering, even with a recent upturn, still remains very, very low, especially compared to the early 1990s and back in the 1980s. We also know that the nuclear engineering enrollments have slumped for over 20 years, but we have seen a pretty good upturn in the last 4 or 5 years, and I think you were probably part of that upturn and a resurgence in the nuclear engineering program here at UT. One thing that we've been looking and focusing on with the Society of Women Engineers is looking at the number of women and minorities in the various engineering disciplines. And there's a number of studies that have been done over the last couple of years that really highlight a real concern that right now women and minorities comprise less than 18% of the nuclear engineering workforce in the United States, but represent over 60% of the U.S. workforce. Another concern that's come up, and there's many articles I found on the website talking about this, is the concern that 50% of the graduate students right now studying nuclear engineering in the United States are from other countries. And there's that concern about them going home, taking all that intelligence and knowledge home to build their own industries, which is great, but then we lose it here. Okay, so now we know we don't have enough nuclear engineers. What are we going to do? Well, there's the other problem. There's too many jobs. So too few nuclear engineers, too many jobs. There's lots of different predictions out there. I found a wide variety. This is one I picked that I've seen quoted many times, that by the end of this decade, the United States is expected to create about 2 million new jobs in science and engineering. We also know that there's a significant gap between the number of new BS and MS nuclear engineer graduates and the growing demand in nuclear industries. Many articles out there by the different professional societies and government agencies. We also know that 25% of the engineering workforce will retire over the next 10 years. And this is a big issue here in the Oak Ridge area. I know there's been articles about the retirement of many of the workers in Oak Ridge, especially at the Y-12 plant and so forth, and what the impacts that's going to have on operations in Oak Ridge. We also know that the current demand for engineers, especially the power production, energy, medical research, D&D of nuclear facilities, radioactive waste management, just to mention a few, are not being met. I know in the area I've been working for the last 4 years out in Oak Ridge is radioactive waste management and operation in nuclear facilities. We just can't find enough nuclear engineers out there. It's a real problem. We're all stealing them from each other. And we're getting people out of retirement to work part-time in order to address some of these issues. We also know, how is industry dealing with this if there's not enough nuclear engineers? Well, one, they're importing a lot of talent from overseas, and they're also exporting work. Just throw up some census numbers here. I'm not sure if you can see them from a distance there, that this is a census of engineers that was taken in 2000. And overall, for all engineers, about 17% of the engineers are women. And then there's a breakdown here of the different areas that, you could use pen here, that for the white, it's for women, it's 16%. And then you go down here, Hispanic, down to 18, Black, about 31, Asian, 22, and then you have your other Native Indians, Pacific Islanders, and so forth. So that's a total picture of all the engineers in the country. And then when you look down at nuclear engineering, it's even smaller when you think about down here that the females are only about 8%, and of that in the white it's 7%, and the Hispanic is pretty even. Well, it's only 25%, a little bit closer. Here in Black, you only have 120 right now in this census that are male and 80 female and Black. So that's really small, and Asians even smaller. So it's, Asians higher, but then your other down is really small, only 4. So it shows you really have a very small group of people here that are actually pursuing nuclear engineering or in the nuclear engineering workforce right now. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, this is one potential fix that has been under development for quite a while. A series of studies, surveys, reports have led up to this report that came out 2 years ago and has initiated a lot of activity at a couple different levels in the federal government and private industry. And this is a decision, or I guess an assumption that was made here, that women and minorities do not participate in the science and engineering labor force in proportion to their numbers in the overall labor workforce. If their intellectual talent were identified, nurtured, and encouraged, the projected gap of scientists and engineers would be filled. And this is a summary from an article, the report down here called The Land of Plenty. Is Diversity as America's Competitive Edge in Science, Engineering, and Technology, done in Washington, D.C. in September 2000. So that was the conclusion from that series of studies and reports. One of the things that they highly recommended was the development of a partnership. And this partnership was called Building Engineering and Science Talent. And it's a public-private partnership that's dedicated to building a stronger, more diverse workforce in science, engineering, technology by increasing participation of the underrepresented groups. So when they talk about underrepresented, it includes women, all the different minorities, as well as your handicap disadvantage. And so this, as I said, this was proposed out of this report. So what is this organization doing, this public-private partnership? They came up with a 3-year mission to develop and execute a national execution plan to increase the participation in all technical fields. Well, how are they going to do this? And in their report, they talk about 3 different things they're going to focus on. One is looking at best practices. They're going to evaluate the existing best-in-class and exceptionally promising programs. Look at the programs out there right now by different professional societies, nonprofit organizations, and universities that are trying to recruit women and minorities in nuclear engineering, trying to get more kids to study math and science in junior high and high school, different programs to keep the students in the engineering programs once they get to college. So that's one thing we're going to do, look at the best practices. What programs are working right now? The other area was community engagement. They really don't feel like the community understands what the problem is. They don't realize there's a shortage of engineers, and that there's a real need to increase the number of kids studying math and science in the high school level to go on into college. So they really want to be able to inform and engage our civic leaders to really understand there is an issue here and how they can implement programs. And their last thing they're going to focus on is developing a national strategy. And they're going to develop and implement a strategy, and they're working on this compelling vision, clear objectives, and actionable priorities. So they don't want to be just another report that sits on the shelf and nothing happens. They're trying to come up with real commitments from all the different sectors to action, do something, get something accomplished, and coordinate it with the government, state, and local level. So so what BEST is doing is they're using leaders in academia. So there's many professors across the country from different engineering departments and science departments that are part of this partnership. Government representatives from all the different agencies in the government. Industry, they've got top CEOs and vice presidents of major corporations that are on this partnership. And they're working together with staff to develop this priority. And they've come up with 4 groups right now, and this is what they're working on and advertising and trying to get implemented. And so I'm going to just briefly go through those 4 areas just to get you up to speed of what they're doing. And so it's in the federal government, in the education, universities, industry, and then with nonprofit organizations. So what are they doing with the federal government? First of all, they're looking at their effective programs they have and trying to maximize the value of those. Right now, they have lots of different organizations have different programs, Department of Energy, DOD, NASA, but they're not coordinated, they're not aligned, they're not as effective as they could be if they align their funds and their programs and to be more productive. And so one area they're looking at is how can they take all these different government programs, align them, and maximize the use of the funds. Another one is they want to challenge the Congress to really come up with a bold initiative to really address the engineering education crisis. We've seen a lot in the news the last couple of years about math and science education, the testing and so forth, leave no child behind. But a lot of that is improving the schools, improving the teachers and so forth. That's part of the issue, but it really hasn't focused on the real need to get more kids into engineering, studying engineering and going on and studying engineering in college. Another area was leveraging the federal dollars to be matched by the state and local communities. They're trying to get across to everybody it's just not a federal problem, it's just not a local community problem with the local schools or a state problem, it's everyone. All 3 levels need to work together, match their dollars, look at their programs and how they want to implement them in their state. And so this is a big effort, trying to do this matching. It's worked in the past, but it's a major, major effort, and so there's a group working on that. 4th area was increase the investment to expand educational opportunities in math and science and underrepresented groups. And so this is looking at what has worked in the past in terms of educating kids, minorities, and young girls and getting them excited about math and science and engineering and trying to expand on those good programs. So that's what's going on at the federal government level. Next one is, this is your kindergarten to 12 education at the university level. One of the things they've challenged is all the universities to strengthen their presence in the local kindergarten to 12 math and science education. So they're encouraging the universities to get out there and provide workshops, training for teachers, and to help evaluate what's going on in their local school systems. Are the kids getting the right math and science education, and are they doing the appropriate things to keep the minorities and women, girls interested in science and math, so you have those kids coming out of high school that will be going into the local universities to study engineering. The other thing is actively recruiting students from underrepresented groups. They've done lots of surveys across the country, and some universities seem to be doing an excellent in this area. They have a high percentage of women. Some of the engineering programs have that 45% in women, and others are low as only 15%. So there's a wide disparity here among the universities in recruiting women, and some of the numbers in minorities is the same way. So look at some of the universities that are being successful. What are their programs? How are they doing that to get those kinds of numbers? A third area is really to nurture the students. Once you get the students in, nurture them, provide a mentoring support to keep them in there. Because right now they have a very high attrition rate. And I know in my travels across the country, when I was national president for Society of Women Engineers, I met with many deans of engineering. And they were saying, you know, we get the kids in, we get the girls in, we're getting the minorities in, but they only stay a year or two and then they drop out. What's wrong? And so we start having a dialogue. Well, are you providing any kind of support for them? Do they need to catch up? Do they have a cultural difference? What are you doing to try to identify that and try to deal with it? And so it's another whole aspect that many of the universities hadn't thought about. The last one is transform the diversity composition of the faculty. And this is always a challenge if you don't have a lot of turnover in your faculty to bring in. And you have to search far and wide. You have to have a focused effort if you want to change the diversity composition of your faculty. But as you can see, that provides you with the role models. I know I talk to many students that when they go around and look at different universities, they sort of look at who the faculty is. And I know I've had some women engineers come in, girls that want to go into engineering, and they say, Gail, I went and interviewed this university, and I asked them if they had women on faculty, and they didn't have any in the engineering program I was interested in. I was reluctant to go there, and so they chose another university. And they're being real honest when they've said that. Industry, third area, challenging industry. The challenging industry that commit to develop and use more U.S. engineering and science talent. As I mentioned earlier on, how are they dealing with this gap in engineering? Well, they're importing talent or they're exporting the work. And so this organization, BEST, is trying to challenge industry into trying to really make this commitment to help develop more U.S. engineers and science talent so that they don't have to go abroad. Another thing is they're challenging industry to strengthen the corporate presence in the education process. We've seen some of that with some of the recent initiatives with Leave No Child Behind and math and science efforts from President Bush, but there's still a lot more that could be done in providing corporate support for the education. Let the local, superintendents of the schools and so forth let them know what the expectations are from industry. What kind of talent do they want coming out of the school system? What is expected? If they're churning out kids, they don't have the right background in math and science, and they can't support the industry we have in the United States. So they need to really let the school teachers and principals and superintendents know what the expectations are. Also providing people that can go into the classroom and speak and do hands-on projects and provide resources for all sorts of science labs, engineering exercises, and so forth at the schools. Another one is embedding diversity in the R&D partnerships with the university. This is mainly requiring that if they're going to provide funding for R&D to the universities, require a certain portion of matching in diversity and the requirements for the grants and so forth. And then the last one is look internally. Have you created a culture of inclusiveness in the workplace? Some of the engineering employers have done an excellent job. Others are still trying to figure out what to do. And so there's a wide range there of comfort. So some of them really need to work on that because they have the same problem. Maybe they're going out and recruiting women, minorities, and engineers, new graduates from college and so forth, and they have the same problem. After a couple of years, they leave. Well, why are they leaving? Well, maybe it was not a comfortable work environment for the women or minorities, and that's why they left. The fourth area is the nonprofit organizations. These are the ones that have been trying out there with volunteers and little funding to try to get this done. As I know, I've been very involved with one of them, Society of Women Engineers. And what they're challenging these nonprofit organizations to do is project a more positive public image of science, engineering, and technology. And I know many of you have heard the joke. You go out and ask the public what an engineer does, and they say they drive a train. We've got to be able to expand the public's image of what engineers do. and what scientists do, and make them really understand that their lifestyle is completely tied to it. All their new gadgets, you know, their phones, their microwaves, their car, all this was developed by engineers, and if they want to keep it all running, we have to educate more engineers, and also to be competitive again in the world, because we know in other countries, such as Sweden and Japan, they're all exceeding the United States in terms of the number of engineers and scientists that are graduating and in the workforce. What they're asking to do is that professional societies of scientists and engineers should put diversity front and center on their agenda. Some of the engineering societies have been very focused on standards, which is very important too, looking at other aspects of their discipline. But what they're challenging all the professional societies and scientists to do, organizations, is really put diversity up there. Put it on their agenda. What are they looking at when they're looking at their programs year to year? This is one thing that the Society of Women Engineers has had on our agenda for many years, many years. A little advertisement here. The Society of Women Engineers was founded in 1950. And in the 1960s, when we were trying to hold national conferences in various locations, some of our members were not allowed in the conferences because of segregation laws. So we made a decision at the executive director level and board of directors to no longer hold conferences where not all of our members were allowed. And since then, we've done an active job of expanding our concept of diversity and doing the reach out to minorities, musicians, to women. That's how important it is to Society of Women Engineers. We also think that foundations should stress improvement in math and science education and diversity. So these are different, like your foundation, like the Science, National Science Foundation, also your corporate foundations like Ford Foundation and so forth, that give grants and money for development of different programs, education, scholarships. Have them go back and look, could they do better? Could they do more to help encourage diversity in engineering? And then the last challenge was align their efforts to more effectively advance common interest in programs. Many different organizations have been working out there sort of separately, or it's like stovepipes. And what can we do to work together? And this is one thing the Society of Women Engineers has been doing for the last few years, working with the other minority-focused organizations. We've worked together for the last 10 years with NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. How can we do better joint programs, support each other at our national conferences, share some of our good programs, our materials, and take benefit of them? And the same thing, we've been working with the Society of Hispanic Engineers on the same type of thing. What can we do to support each other? Right now, we really don't care who gets the message out there. We just want to get the message out. And if we can work together, pool our resources, that's going to be more effective. And that's what we're trying to do. So what we like to do is do that also with the other engineering societies, such as the American Nuclear Society. What can the Society of Women Engineers and American Nuclear Society do together to expand the outreach to get more engineers? What I'd like to do is just quickly touch on some of the programs that Society of Women Engineers has. So you understand when I'm talking about programs, you can have a better mental picture. Back in 2001, we developed a nationwide agreement with the Girl Scouts to update and expand their engineering and technology events and activities. We looked at what they had called as an engineering or science badge for the junior Girl Scouts. It was very, very simple, very out of date, and only really focused on I think it was 3 or 4 areas of engineering. And after we looked at that, we go, no, we can do a better job. There's all these disciplines in engineering. There's lots more fun, hands-on things that the girls can be doing to really get excited about science and technology. So we've been working with the Girl Scouts at the local level, trying to improve these in a different region. And what we said, okay, this region came up with this really good idea. Say in Oak Ridge, we came up with a really good idea working with the nuclear engineers. But a lot of the other Girl Scout events across the country didn't have anything with nuclear engineering. So we're trying to take what we learned here and the good ideas and spread it nationwide. So this was an initiative in 2001 to have this like a memorandum of understanding with the Girl Scouts to update their engineering badge, expand it for more disciplines, and come up with better quality programming for the Girl Scouts. This is just an example of the Utah State University students, and they're taking simple machines to visit the Brownies. So we start at the very low level with the Brownies. We haven't done the daisies yet, but we're with the Brownies and work our way up. Another thing what we've been doing, this started in 2003, we've been working with Girls Inc. These are the girls that, coming from your economic depressed areas, many of them are for single parent homes, that go to Girls Inc. after school. This is where they do their homework. This is where they hang out until they're picked up by their parent or guardian. And so these are after-school programs, weekend programs, and then they conduct summer camps all summer for these girls. Society of Women Engineers went in with Girls Inc. and submitted a grant proposal to the National Science Foundation and received funding to develop these new modules to really encourage the girls to think about science, math, and technology. And we're working on 4 different modules right now in 4 different locations. One of the modules is being done right here in Oak Ridge. It's called Galaxy Girls. It's getting the girls excited about space and all the different aspects of science and technology that goes with space, space travel, and so forth. Once these modules are approved and evaluated by educators, we're going to be able to distribute these nationwide to all the different Girls Inc. Organizations across the country. So we're pretty excited about this and hope in the next couple of years that this will be finalized. This summer they're conducting a 4-week camp at Girls Inc. in Oak Ridge. And they're going to be designing spacesuits, learning how rockets work, and they have a lot of fun things to do. So it looks like a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to going out and helping out with it. Just want to touch on a couple other things. Our national president, Shelley Wolf, in 2002, was on the BEST panel to evaluate best practices for the kindergarten and 12th, and she's continuing to serve on that. I meant to show you earlier this report, and this is available for those that are interested on the American Association of Engineering Society website. And this is the report that came out from BEST. It's called The Quiet Crisis, Falling Short in Producing American Science and Technical Talent. And in the back here, you can see all the different people from industry and academia, nonprofit organizations, and educators that are on these different panels. And it shows here that SWE is on one of these panels. The executive director from the American Women in Science is on a panel. So it shows that kind of involvement on developing these programs. 2 things that have come up recently is our current president, who is Alma Martinez, is focusing on alignment with outreach programs with other engineering societies. So they've been meeting and having discussions with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. She's a mechanical engineer, works at Northrop Grumman, and she started there. We've also had dialogue with the American Society of Civil Engineers and IEEE, forming memorandums of agreement about taking SWE programs and using their resources and their muscle, I guess you want to call it, to help to broaden the distribution of these programs to reach more kids. And she's been very effective on getting that done, and we're hoping to expand and include a few more societies, organizations by the end of this year. Our incoming president for next year, Vi Brown, she's going to be focusing on discussing diversity as an economic imperative. She came to our local regional conference in North Carolina last month and really stressed this as an important part of her platform, is really getting people to talk about diversity and understand how it impacts our economy. So it ties right in with what we're talking about today. Okay. Despite the many challenges many women and minorities face to pursue careers in nuclear engineering, there are numerous examples of achievement. And why are that? Why have some of them been able to achieve that? Well, these are anecdotes. These are discussions I had with various nuclear engineers, and this is what they told me. So I'd like to have a little dialogue. Maybe you've got some other input. They're saying it's a relatively new discipline, so it's not as entrenched as some of the other engineering disciplines. Does anyone have a feel for that? Is it easier to get into nuclear engineering? Is it more comfortable because it's not an old engineering discipline? Yes?
I feel so.
You feel so? Good, good. I think the only discipline that's probably younger than nuclear engineering is environmental engineering, and that's the one I'm in. And I know there's lots of women in environmental engineering, and a lot of them started in science and switched over to environmental engineering. There's also, I got a lot of feedback from people saying, well, there's a real strong crossover between physics and chemistry where there's more women and minorities. It's a lot more women and minorities go into the sciences, get into physics, and then they find out, oh, there's this nuclear engineering over here that's sort of like physics, and they like it. And that's how some of them get into it. You know, that's the story I was told.
Gail, I think those numbers are skewed for chemistry. I think a lot of more women go into chemistry than physics. I have a physics background, and I can tell you, reading the physics journals and news magazines, that their numbers and are not really any better than nuclear engineering. And they're trying to figure out how to change whatever they need to change to get more women into physics. But physics is probably harder for women to succeed in than nuclear engineering.
Okay. That's good input.
History as a chemist, and I know there's lots of women that take chemistry and do chemistry for whatever reason. But, I think that statement probably needs to be just a strong crossover with chemistry.
Okay. As I said, these were just these were quotes I got from people. That's good. Thanks for the input. Thanks for the input. Okay. The other one is that the government has actively recruited and implemented policies that encourage women and minorities. We know that over the last 10 years, or 10 to 15 years, the Department of Energy, the NRC, have very actively recruited, mentored women and minorities in nuclear engineering in those two agencies. And you can see the impact because a number of their senior level directors and technical staff and so forth are women and minorities. It's been very effective. So that was the other input I got from talking to a number of people. What I'd like to do is just touch on a couple of examples here. Some of these examples were provided to me by the American Nuclear Society as examples they wanted me to cite and suggested. We have Niels Diaz here, who's the chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. He's got his PhD and master's in nuclear engineering. And just to recap here some of the highlights off of his resume, he started off as a principal advisor to Spain's nuclear regulatory program, was associate dean for research at Cal State, and then a principal engineer with Florida Nuclear Associates, which is a private consulting firm, and the director of Innovative Nuclear Space Power Institute, and then was a professor of nuclear engineering at the University of Florida. And then he joined the NRC in 1996 as a commissioner, and then was appointed, I believe, just 2 years ago as chairman. So that's one example of someone coming up through nuclear engineering. Another person to highlight, and then I had an opportunity to meet Gail Marcus, very dynamic. She was actually a speaker here. I think it was 3 years ago. She was the speaker and talked to the engineering, the societies here at UT. And she has her PhD in nuclear engineering, but she's one that came through physics, and she might have been someone that made the comment about physics. So, but she was the first woman in the U.S. to receive a PhD in nuclear engineering in '71. And she started out as a nuclear specialist, worked for the Congressional Research Service, and then started working for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, was the principal deputy director of DOE Office of the Nuclear Engineering Science and Technology, and now she's the deputy director of the Nuclear Engineering Agency. And I also put on there she was the 02 national president of the American Nuclear Society. She's been the second woman to be the president of ANS. Very dynamic woman. If you ever get a chance to meet her. Third person up here, as you can see, is not a nuclear engineer. He has a BS in physics, but he started out as a physicist at Westinghouse, worked for Edison Electric, but then got in working with the DOE, Associate Director of Planning and so forth, Acting Director for the Office of Nuclear Engineering Science and Technology, and he's now the Director. So you ask, well, why did I put him on here? Well, the reason I did is because he has been very successful in initiating programs at DOE to support energy research, university research, the training reactors, and nuclear engineering programs. And there's been several interviews and documentation of some of these programs that he's initiated since he started in '96 with DOE that really has helped improve nuclear engineering programs at different universities and providing scholarships. And there's a direct correlation between the number of students coming in and retaining in nuclear engineering with the increase in scholarship programs from DOE. So if you're interested, I have more data on that. So that's why I put him in there. I thought that was a dynamic example of an effective government program. Okay, so now I've talked about 3 old mucky mucks up in D.C. And I said, well, I thought I'd come up with 2 more examples closer to home, a little bit younger, that shows what can be done. The next two women are nuclear engineers that I've had an opportunity to work with, and they're both very impressive. First one here is Susana Navarro-Belante, and she's president and CEO of her own company, Navarro Research and Engineering, and has her PhD and MS in nuclear engineering. And she received in '93 the A&S Marks Mills Award, which is for the best PhD thesis in the United States that year. From there, she went off and founded her own company, and it's a women-owned, small, disadvantaged business, and its headquarters in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And so these are some of the things that I got off of their website. It's technical, environmental, and safety services, third fastest growing business in Tennessee, ninth fastest growing Hispanic business in the United States, and in 2002, it received the Small Business Administration Excellence Award. So there's an example of a Hispanic and a woman starting her own business and doing very, very well in nuclear engineering. The other example is a little bit closer to home. This is my boss. This is Margie Lewis. She's president and CEO of Parallax Incorporated. She got her BS in nuclear engineering at Georgia Institute of Technology. And one of the things that she likes to brag about is in 1998, she got the Ted Turner Trumpet Award for African American achievement. She was pretty thrilled by that. And as you can see, she's made the cover of Black Enterprise and several other magazines, but that was the best one photo, so that's the one I put up here. She started out her career as a reactor physicist for DuPont at the Savannah River site, became the superintendent of licensing for the Kewanee nuclear plant, and then was recruited by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and as a safety inspector. And then she decided to found, in 1992, her own women-owned business, and a small disadvantaged business. Now, her headquarters are in Germantown, near D.C., because she has a lot of major contracts out of Washington, D.C. with DOE headquarters, but we also have an office here at Oak Ridge, as well as at almost every DOE site across the country. And we do engineering, environmental management services. And one of the awards that she received recently was the DOE 8A Contractor of the Year Award in 2002. So these are recent examples of younger nuclear engineers that can really brag on some very positive achievement. One of the things I mentioned in my abstract was going to touch on job opportunities. And this is probably an area you know better than I do. I was amazed going out there and looking at the website and talking to different people how many job opportunities there are for nuclear engineering. And I, like many people, had a very narrow idea of what nuclear engineers did. But when I went out there and started looking, I realized there was a lot. So you can add a few more things. I got 2 pages here of different things that you could have been looking at. I don't know, here for nuclear engineering, do you have a pretty good career center with lots of description of different job opportunities and so forth? I think part of this, one reason I wanted to go over this was to get it fresh in our mind, to think about what can we go out and tell women and minorities about opportunities in nuclear engineering. If they think and have a misperception the only thing you do with nuclear engineering is run a nuclear power plant or build bombs, then that's really limited, and that's not really giving them the true picture of all the opportunities and things that you can do with this degree. So I think one area that I thought was real interesting was life extension. A lot of effort going on in life extension now for nuclear power plants. I believe there's like 104 nuclear power plants in the country, and a good number of them are looking at relicensing. And if they get relicensed, I mean, they could be operating out to 2030, 2040, 2050, something like that. I mean, talk about job security. That's a long time to operate. Those that don't obviously get relicensed will have to be decommissioned and demolished. Medical treatment, there's treatment research. A lot of that's going in the lab. I'd say Oak Ridge National Lab, looking at the research and treatment there, and isotope production. I think about the hyper and so forth. Universities. What kind of research are you doing here at the University of Tennessee? Are you looking at new generation reactors, or what other kind of research are you doing here?
We do a variety of research. Next generation reactors is one of them. Mm-hmm. We do research in medical applications, radiological engineering, fusion reactors, the traditional reactor theory and computation, thermal hydraulics, reactor dynamics, instrumentation, all kinds.
You got a lot of research going on. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So that's good. And I'm sure that's a real draw for UT, that you have that kind of research going on, those research dollars, so forth. One area I did not see on the list, and so I put it on here, was your consulting and AE. And most of my career I've been working for consulting companies. I started my career working for Bechtel, and then I worked for Foster Wheeler Environmental for about 17 years, and then I went back to Bechtel for a while, and now I'm taking the challenge with a small business. But did a lot of design construction, and I started my career the design and startup of nuclear power plants with Bechtel. And so I didn't see that listed in the normal websites and so forth, but if you go out and look at all the different consulting companies, there's a lot of job opportunities out there. And also remediation, such as the Bechtel Jacobs having the contract here in Oak Ridge. They're doing remediation to the site, waste management, a lot of radioactive waste out there that still has to be dealt with. And D&D of the facilities, lots of old nuclear facilities that were built back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that have to be D&D'd and so forth. The other area, federal government, of course, you know, NRC inspection and licensing and so forth, and research reactors, weapons, facilities operations, the DOE and so forth. I guess I just want to highlight, since I'm an environmental engineer, and that was my area of focus, I've had a real problem trying to hire environmental engineers that understand radioactivity. A lot of them that go into environmental engineering are very committed to cleaning up the environment, but they don't want to have anything to do with radioactivity because they don't want to work for someone that built bombs or had something to do with it, so they have this misperception. And so I've also tried trying to hire old nuclear engineers that design power plants and try to turn them into environmental engineers so we could deal with waste management issues, and that didn't work very well either. So just a little pitch here. If you're in nuclear engineering and you're interested in cleaning up the environment, there's a real special niche for you, and there's a number of companies that would love to hire you because it's really hard to find people that understand the environmental laws, have a concern for the environment, and then want to look at treatment of radioactive waste, but still understand the nuclear operations and all the nuclear requirements and so forth to do that. And, of course, the Navy. Lots of people I know in the Navy. Okay. If you haven't got on the website yet, and hopefully you all have, but if you haven't, there is tons of information on the website. American Nuclear Society has a huge section on job opportunities. All your agencies have excellent websites with lots of information on job opportunities. The Nuclear Energy Institute had some excellent information, too. I was really surprised at how much they had. And, of course, I referenced earlier the American Association of Engineering Societies. Of course, they're looking at job opportunities for all types of engineers. So what other job resources are you looking at here? Do you have a regular recruiting program going in here in your placement center at UT for nuclear engineers for your students? A department?
There are some, if you can walk or chew gum, you don't even have to be able to do both. If you can walk or chew gum and have a nuclear engineering degree, somebody's going to offer you a good job with good stuff. So
that's the kind of stuff that's what I thought. Reading the articles, they were talking that most nuclear engineers coming out, even undergraduate, usually get 2 or 3 offers. Those coming out of master's level can probably get 4 or 5 offers. And I've heard different quotes that it's the second highest paid engineering discipline or the third highest paid engineering discipline in the country right now. So you guys are prime candidates.
University has job fairs, a lot of companies come to the campus and introduce students.
Do you think the fact that there is such a need for nuclear engineers, that they do have such job security and high salaries, is that helping to recruit more students, or is that message getting out there? Any ideas?
Partly, I think.
yeah, I think that for a long time there probably was a perception that there were no jobs. For a long time the jobs were hard to come by. They're not hard to come by anymore. The salaries are good.
Well, I
think the word gets out.
Yeah. And it looks like this is going to last for a long time. I don't think there's going to be the downturn again, especially if you keep on with all the relicensing of the power plants, plus all the new research and everything else going on. It seems like it's real job security. Okay, let me end up here with wrap up with a challenge. What did you do to help increase the U.S. nuclear engineering workforce? I've been talking about all these programs with federal government agencies, the university, nonprofit organizations, and industry. Let's get it down here to us sitting in the room. What can we do? So the first area I'd like to talk about is what about UT and Nuclear Engineering Department. So I'm glad I've got a couple of professors here who talk about this. Strengthen the first one let's look at is strengthen the UT presence in the local elementary, middle, and high school math and science education. I'm sure you're already doing some of that. It's just a matter of strengthening that and expanding that. I know it takes funding, it takes time, and but it's probably more important. So I know you probably did some of that when there was a slump and we were trying to recruit more nuclear engineers. Part of this is expanding that to really try to focus on the girls and minorities in the elementary, high school level. So.
Also, there is this annual Southern Appalachian Science and Engineering Fair, which is sponsored by UT and the Engineering Society. And there are some UT faculty that are involved in that.
Good. Good.
I think that it's really key that you get them down in middle school and high school. I think for nuclear engineering, we're a very small department here. If you look at a whole high school, how many people are you going to get in the high school to go into nuclear engineering? If you're lucky, one. So on the average, 0. Now, how many women would come out of that high school and go into engineering? So there's a much larger group there. What is the Society of Women in Engineering doing at each and every high school on a regular basis?
On a regular basis?
Yes.
The main focus we're having right now is with our science and math certificate program. We write to all the counselors and math and science teachers in all the high schools, at least in this area, and ask who are the outstanding girls in math and science. And we give them a certificate, and we try to come up with funding to give them some kind of scholarship, but at least give them recognition and provide them materials from the Society of Women Engineers about career opportunities in engineering, and encourage them, if they do get accepted to engineering, to apply for scholarships. We distribute over $500,000 a year in scholarships to women in engineering across the country at different universities.
I think the Society of Women Engineers is pretty visual here on campus because there's a local chapter. Have you ever thought of taking anything down to the level of high schools and having, I don't know if you call it a chapter at that level, but some kind of a feeder program?
Yeah, we've thought about that.
Camaraderie ship, and you can actually at least at some of the big major high schools, you could have something like that.
We've been looking into it. We have been challenged to do that. Right now what we're doing is working in the junior colleges. That's the next step we're working at. We're putting in associate sections, we're calling, at the junior colleges, trying to encourage more women to go into engineering technology, drafting design, CAD design, that sort of, and sort of get them caught up if they can't qualify to go a 4-year. One thing we've done here locally is the SECME, the Southeast Consortium for Minorities in Engineering. They have a very active program in several high schools in the area, and we have several members that support some of those efforts in the high schools. But we have had 2 studies on how do we do it in the high schools, and it would be a major effort, and that's why we're real excited about BEST and some of these recommendations coming out from the national level. Part of that national strategy is to have concerted efforts into the high schools. And so you have your future farmers of America, future business leaders of America, you need your future engineers of America, and you need a concerted effort with engineering societies and different organizations to do that. A good question. Another one is to actively recruit and nurture undergraduates and graduates from underrepresented groups. I'm not sure what your recruitment program is right now for that kind of outreach. I know I probably at least once a week either get an email or a phone call about, how can we, help my company or my university do a better job of recruiting. How do we get out there? What kind of materials should we use to go out to the high schools and try to attract women and minorities? We're trying to give them examples to use.
It's not about educating the teachers themselves. I know when I was in high school, when I took calculus, it was 50-50 girls guys, basically. And one of the girls asked the teacher, why would you ever need to know calculus? And our teacher could not answer, or even given a profession where calculus was used on a regular basis. No, to me, that is a terrible shame. Have you all thought about having programs to educate teachers that are with the students on a daily basis you know, to put out that there are degrees that you use math in, other than, you know, like accounting.
Yes, that's one thing that has been discussed also extensively. I know things are changing. It used to be we tried to volunteer to go into the high schools and work with the teachers, and because of the requirements, especially in different school systems, if you were not an educator and you were not a parent, you're not allowed on campus or into the school. And it was a real problem because I'm not a parent and I'm not a teacher. But I wanted to go in and work with girls and get them excited, or any students excited about math and science. Things are changing, and we've been able to set up some after-school programs on a pilot basis at a couple of locations around the country, just giving it a try to see how it works, and setting up summer camps for junior high and high school girls that they could come in the summertime and try it for a week or two and do a lot of hands-on experiments and stuff. But there's a long way to go. We were really hoping with some of the new initiatives that President Bush and the staff were talking about 2 years ago on improving math and science education, it would include educating the teachers, and we were sort of disappointed. It got really focused on this testing, and it lost some of the education of the teachers, which is what we really need. I know I had a personal experience the same way. When I tried to go ahead and take more science and math my senior year in high school, I was told I didn't need it. I had plenty to graduate. And when I told them that I wanted to go to college to study science, my counselor told me that was not necessary. And he wouldn't even sign the permission slip to let me take those advanced classes. So we had to call my father and have him tell counselor that I could take those advanced classes my senior year. So, and that's still out there. We're still hearing those stories all these years later, and that's sort of sad.
What
but
part of the country was this?
This was in California, but this was a number of years ago. But, you know, this is
Those stories are still out there. We see them regularly. One reason for getting involved early in the middle school or high school is so that they do take those math and science courses. If they decide the senior year and then show up here with algebra and geometry and trig, we're going to have a real problem with it.
And that might be an idea of working with the junior colleges, of getting some of those kids into junior college so they can do some catch-up for 1 year or two and then transfer, is another idea. It's more coordination, more logistics, but that's one idea.
The UT College of Engineering has an engineering diversity program.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it is.
You mentioned the summer activities. I don't know whether Oak Ridge National Lab still does it, but a few years ago, they would have literally thousands of students and teachers, K through 12, through on relatively brief.
Mm-hmm.
The College of Engineering could do that. We couldn't as a department. The College of Engineering could put on something like that, but it takes organization, it takes money, it takes development. But if you can, as you were just saying, and others were saying, interest at the middle school level, in particular, even just a small percentage of that crop that you can get through, that's the real starting point. And it's difficult to work with the system further on when there's not people coming up through the system.
I think part of it, you can get down to middle school and get those kids the spark and the interest, they might be able to overcome a poorly qualified teacher or other inhibitions if they've got that spark and that drive, but you got to get the spark down there. So, of course, the last challenge in here, as you might expand, is expanding your faculty diversity. And I'm not sure where UT is right now, so just a thought there to think about that. Okay, one more here. Okay, so we've been talking about the university, we've been talking about the faculty, and all these students have been sitting back here, I don't have to do anything. Nope, I'm not going to let you off. Okay, what can students do? Students, you can support outreach programs to local schools. What we've learned over the years, in Leaf Society of Women Engineers, and I've heard the same story from Nesby and Schiff and so forth, that when they go out to the schools, if they can take college students, that the kids really, they really get excited about the college students. And I know when we organized like the Girl Scout workshops this last year, we've had the college students come out, and when those Girl Scouts see the college students, they get so excited, and they just sort of like hang on every word they say. They really want to know from these young college girls, why are you studying engineering, what are you doing? And so that's really important to be a role model and go out there and help support some of these efforts. The other one is helping recruit students from the underrepresented groups. I don't know. I know some universities use and organize with Society of Women Engineers like NSBE and actually use our members, our student members, to go out and recruit in the high schools. I'm not sure if UT does that, but it's also been very effective. And the girls, I've got the feedback from the SWE members, really have enjoyed going out and doing recruitment in the high school. Another is to support existing outreach programs being conducted by the different societies and so forth. I know A&S is really trying to expand their programs here in conjunction with UT on outreach to women and minorities. And then the other one would be to really encourage A&S. I think the faculty could do this as well as the students. Encourage the American Nuclear Society to really expand the diversity of programs and scholarships. I know they have a few scholarships. I know they're trying to expand their programs, but they still have a long way to go. So I think it's partly as members, either as student members or professional members, you can encourage the American Nuclear Society to either help develop programs or work programs in conjunction with other organizations, if that's what it's going to take to go out and recruit. I'd just like to acknowledge the people that helped me put this together. Some of you might know I mentioned Julie earlier. She's a nuclear engineer at UT Battelle and also your president of A&S, the Oak Ridge Knoxville section, and she's the one that I think told Dr. Dobbs to invite me to speak, so we need to thank her. I also used the executive director for A&S and Society of Women Engineers for information. Another nuclear engineer at Jacobs Engineering, Kathy House, she's vice president of the SWE section, professional section, and she helped me figure out how to navigate the A&S website, get through that, and then, of course, my support staff at Parallax. So, thank you.
We have time for a couple of questions. I have a question for you. What are some of the examples of how industry gets involved in this kind of activity? Specific examples?
Part of it is funding, providing funding for different programs. I know, like when we were doing our the Girl Scout badge this last year, we would approach UT Battelle to provide some of the materials and stuff for some of the hands-on exercises with nuclear engineering and so forth. Going to other industry, we were doing a series. I was doing a series on CAD design, and a local AE firm helped provide the monitor and the CAD program and so forth that the girls could use, and provided me drawings to use. So a lot of it's just providing the resources and materials to actually use to set up these programs, as well as funding to help buy materials that are not provided. That's a big start. Part of it is providing time for their workers to get off of work. That's the trouble with going into schools. It's during the workday, and if your employer will let you get off for a couple hours in the afternoon and let you charge to a community service or some kind of account, then it's easier to get into schools to do this versus taking your own versatile PTO or vacation time to do it. So those are two areas that would really help.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? We have refreshments in 219. Ms. Mattson would be available for further questions. Before we adjourn here, let's express our appreciation.
I figure it'd be a little bit different than what you used here.
So nice. Did you download from the ANS website?
Yes. No, I was just trying.
This was a cover story, actually.
Yes, it was. It was very well done. I was really impressed.